need a haircut. All right. All right, guys. So, what's the geometric meaning of the imaginary unit? So we're going to write here, let's see. Geometric, the geometry of the multiplication of I. The geometry of multiplying by I. Multiplying by I. And then what you're going to do, leave a little bit of space and draw a number line. If you need rulers, they're in the back. If you're one of those folks that likes to have a ruler. Right there, and there we go. All right. Okay, so if I took a number line here, say like this, and I said that was 0, and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and I said this was 1, 2, 3, and this would be -1, -2, -3. All right. So you could take any number you want and put it on this number line somewhere. Like you could put in pi, be over here. You could put in a 1 right there. You could put in a fraction, 5/2, that's 2.5. You could put in the square root of 2, it's about 1.7. You could put in negative numbers. Any number you've ever dealt with in your life could be plotted somewhere on this line. Okay? And if you took any number, these are all real numbers. So the x-axis represents real numbers. All right, if you took a real number and you multiplied it, let's say by -1. All right, if I take a number and I multiply it by -1, so like 2, obviously it goes to -2. So if I took 2 and I multiplied it by a -1, it ends up here at -2. Well, that's the same thing as it rotating how many degrees? Yeah. All right. So what that means is that tells us that multiplying by -1 is the same as rotating the number 180 degrees around the origin. And that was counterclockwise, opposite the clock. All right, so that's what multiplying by -1 is. Okay, but we want to figure out what's multiplying by I the same as. Okay, now remember, I is the same as the square root of -1. So instead of it being a 180-degree turn, we want to see what kind of rotation that is. All right, so if I put an applet up here, let me see, find it, or an animation demonstrating this. All right, so if you look at this little GeoGebra applet, I'm going to take, this one's set at 1 instead of 2. All right, so if I take this 1 right here where that green X is, and I multiply it by -1, it's going to rotate 180 degrees over here. Okay, so for me to rotate it by -1, that's the same, or multiply it by -1, we know that's the same as multiplying it by I squared, because I squared is the same as -1. Okay, so you can see that when it moves 180 degrees. Okay, so when I did this, let's see. Okay. So this would be the same as if I took 2 and I multiplied it by I squared, because we know I squared is the same as -1. Do you follow me why that is? Are we okay with that? Why I squared is -1? Or you're not sure? Not sure? Okay. The reason why you're like, Krolak, how do you know I squared is -1? All right. Here's the reason why I squared is -1. If you take I right up here, if you look up at the screen, all right, now watch. So if you're not sure where it came from, watch what I do. Eyes up front. I'm going to take this and I'm going to square it. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to square it. And when I do that, I get I squared on the left. And when you square square root, those cancel. So I know I squared is -1. That's where it comes from. So that's where I got this. So multiplying by -1 is the same as multiplying by I squared. See, it's the exact same thing. All right, so now we know that when you multiply by I squared, it's the same as rotating it 180 degrees counterclockwise. Okay, they're the same thing. All right, so now we did all of this to figure out, well, if multiplying by I squared is the same as 180 degree turn, what would happen if you multiplied by I? So you're not multiplying by I squared now. Now you're multiplying by I. Well, I squared was 180, so what do you think multiplying by I is? How much? Yeah, it's the same as multiplying by 90. If I squared is 180, then I would be 90. And if we look at our applet here, okay, here we are at 1. Okay, in our drawing on our paper, we're at 2, but here's 1. Now, I'm going to multiply this by I. So I got I to the 0, which is just 1. And notice, every time I multiply it by I, it rotates 90 degrees counterclockwise. Another 90, another 90, another 90, another 90. So every power of I is the same as turning the point 90 degrees counterclockwise. But the problem is when you do it, it's not ending on a real number, it's ending on an imaginary number. Okay? Like I to the 33 is not 1, it's I. You can't plot it on the horizontal axis. You need another axis. And that's why we draw a second axis here. So now come in here and you're going to draw a second axis going this way, like that. Okay, so if I took a number, let's say I took the number 1 or 3, let's see. If I took 3 and I multiplied it by I, this axis now is known as the imaginary axis. It's not XY anymore. All right, and this would be the same as I, 2I, 3I, etc. This would be negative 1I, or I to the first. Okay. This would be 2I, and this would be 3I, negative 3I. So imaginary numbers get plotted on this line. You can't plot them on the blue line because those are real numbers. It's like imaginary numbers. If you try to, it's like magnets repelling each other. You try to put an imaginary number on the real number and it's going to fly off. You can't put it there. Okay, so now if let's say we took the number 3 and we multiplied it by I. So this would go right there. This would be 3 times I. That is a 90-degree turn. Okay, the blue one up there, that was 2 times I squared, and that was a 180-degree turn. So every power of I is a 90-degree turn. Okay, that's the big idea. Okay, so multiplying by I squared would be the same as 180. Multiplying by I cubed would be the same as another 90, 270. Okay, and multiplying by I to the fourth, you're going to be back right where you started. Okay, so this would be that would be 3 times I squared. This would be 3 times I cubed. And that would be the same as 3 times I to the fourth. So these are your base numbers here. Okay, so we'll write them out right here. So let's say right here we'll go powers of I. Powers of I. All right, and then we'll draw some lines from that. Let's see, we got okay, so we have we got I to the 0, I to the first, I to the second, I to the third. Oh no, crash. There it is. I to the third. I have heavy duty tissue guaranteed not to burst. Yeah, go ahead. Back in my day, we used cardboard boxes as tissue. I guess you guys are softer. That and planks of wood, plywood. None of this soft tissue stuff. Boy. Alrighty. Okay, now we know what these values are now. This is the same as 1, because anything to the 0 power is 1. I to the first is the same as I. I to the second is the same as -1. And I to the third is the same as -I. Do you see how we're getting those? Okay, this is I to the 0, I to the first, right there. Okay, I squared, I cubed, and then this would be the same as I to the fourth. So that's where I'm getting these. So each one of those is just a all the way around. Okay, now we can use this, guys, to simplify different powers of I. Okay, so for example, okay, what if I had I to the 20th? Okay, so if you rotate it 90 degrees 20 times, okay, where would you end up? Where? Same spot. Yep. Yes. So how did you know that ahead of time? Yep, exactly. Okay, so we knew that ahead of time because this would be the same as, all right, if I took 20 and I divided by 4, 5, this would be 5 complete revolutions. Not 90-degree revolutions, but complete revolutions. So this 5 right here represents 5 360 revolutions. So that puts you right back at I to the 0, which is 1. Okay, there's no remainder on this. remainder 0. Yes. Go ahead. All right. What if you had something like I to the 45th? Where would I to the 45th land? At the top? So let's see, that's 20. I don't know if I can go up to 45. Oh, I can go up to 40. Can't go to 45. So I can get to 40, but now I got to go 5 more. Or I can go one more time around. That would be 44. So it's 44 full rotations plus 1. That would put me at I to the first, or I. So the way you can do it quickly is by dividing the power by 4. Remainder 1. So this is going to be the same as I to the first. Whatever your remainder is, that's your additional, that's where you're going to end up. So this would be the same as 11 360 turns plus 1 90-degree turn. Eleven 360-degree turns plus 1 90-degree turn. All right, let's see. Okay, how about I to the 22nd? That can't be the bell. Oh.
There will not be snack bar today at lunch. Snack bar line will be closed today at lunch. Thank you.
Okay, I to the 22nd. Yep. So that's going to be 5 full turns with a remainder of 2. So that's going to be I squared, which we know is -1. Okay, and one more, I to the 35th. So that's where she's going to end up. I to the -3, which is -I. Yes.
Can I go to the restroom?
Yep.